Well, hello there, and we are straight into the stream for a change. Firstly, apologies that it's just me, not the people you actually wish to see. And I will be playing on the computer on the side way too much. Unfortunately, Ishtar, our beloved Lucky Break, and also the very handy person who drives most of the players here, couldn't make it tonight. And the game cannot continue without her. So I am the GM sitting here by myself. And what I decided to do in the last minute is to try to put together a quick how-to guide. This is completely off the cuff, very improvised, and here we go. Firstly, we are talking about the final Fantasy Flight game, Age of the Empire. Sister game, Age of Rebellion, and there's also Force and Destiny, which I am not as familiar with. I might cover the Jedi rules briefly, but we don't use them. I find the Jedi fascinating in Star Wars, but I always do think in many ways that the best parts of Star Wars are the bits without Jedis. Still, I'm more than happy to throw an Inquisitor or two at the party. Wait, or two? Let's keep that on the down low, that one. This guide is also to help people out, as it's not a simple D20 system. So I'm hoping I can do this, put it up on YouTube, and that way if people wish to watch our video on demands there, they can. And just as a note, I recently rewatched our first episode of Star Wars. The system takes a little bit of getting used to, and we have definitely improved both the way we use the system and the speed we use the system. As you'll see very shortly, the dice, are non-standard dice. They're the standard shapes, but the symbols on them are different. There is a guide on how to essentially convert numbers on D6s and D12, 12s and D8s to the Age of Empire dice, but they are based on the Genesis dice, so the Genesis dice you can use as well. But they, of course, have their own fancy Star Wars brand. And also a program that can roll the dice. And as you probably saw by that, with my green screen on, you are not going to be able to see the dice properly. So excuse me while I turn my green screen off, and you will be able to see the reality of my existence. You will of course notice that the green screen is a pale green and not a dark green. One day we intend to change this, so all our green screens are the same colour, but that is not today, or a discussion for today. Basically, you have 7 different dice, which sounds a lot. It is a lot. But don't worry, there's a lot of overlap. You have essentially 3 positive dice, 3 negative dice that kind of line up. Just holding them in the wrong order, but they line up like that. Although the dice are weighted always in the positive side's favour, just very, very slightly. And there is also a Force dice with dark side and light side dots. The light side is more powerful, but the dark side is more prevalent on the dice. It is ever ready to serve, which is more relevant in Force and Destiny. So starting with the basics. This is a success symbol. That is what you want. Have one of them that hasn't been cancelled out and you succeed at your action. This is an advantage symbol, and this is where the system starts getting weird. Because the system, you see, is meant to be a narrative system of heroic actions. So you can succeed, you can gain an advantage, or you can do both. So advantage is like all the extra little things. It's I shoot a character, but the advantage lets me knock them down or get a critical hit, depending on how many you get in the weapon's critical rating. An advantage can be you slice a computer system, you get enough advantages, and the GM will grant you the ability to slice into any similar system for this group much easier. So they are good. There are also blind sides, but basically more of them you roll, the better. Basically, more of any of the positive dice you roll, the better. Not like systems like say Dungeons and Dragons, where you roll a d20 and there's an equal chance of getting a 1 as a 20. You can look at a dice pool and roughly know how good that will be. Of course, there's still random chance. That is, called an ability dice. The next option up is the proficiency dice. I'll explain in a moment how you know what your dice pool is, but this has basically more of the success symbols, more advantage symbols, and this happy little fellow here, the triumph symbol. Triumph is not a critical success, although that is probably the easiest way to think about it. The triumph is just that heroic thing. You can easily spend it for a critical hit with your weapon, but to be honest, that is probably the most boring and least useful way to use it. Triumph can turn any situation in your favour to a point. You can designate as a player in this narrative system, I got a triumph. As I shoot, I would like to not only hit him, but have his weapon fall out of his hand or get damaged. That might be pushing it a bit, but I'll normally allow it because I am a generous DM. Or if you get a triumph and say a slicing attempt again, you might be able to lock out the opposition constantly, change all the passwords while you're there. Click the button there. Triumph. There are many options. I should actually get the Triumph list and get some ideas. There are a lot of reference sheets that people have done. This is a very well fan-supported game. Anything to do with Star Wars has a huge amount of fan resources on the internet. I would suggest you have a look around and find them. The fact that I'm already going through paperwork is just a reminder of how recently I prepared to do this. So, in combat, you can... Here's the key thing. Do something vital that will turn the tide of battle. I've allowed that to be finding a back to tank that's basically falls in a character if they're about to get a TPK, or picking up weapons, or somehow working out a way to stop the alarm and stop reinforcements from coming. Basically, I like the players to suggest, but I'm happy with anything that'll give them the heroic moment as they deserve. We'll go with that. This is a boost dice. Basically, you have 2 in 3 chance, or 4 in 6 chance of getting something good. You want as many of these as possible. These are given by environmental factors, assistance. There's actually a rule in there that if a player role plays particularly well, they should get an additional one of these on the next check. That is relevant. I allow the players to decide if they've role played well. I probably don't emphasize it enough to them, because there's a certain point where I play on stream, so you can't just stop and ask every 10 seconds. I trust my players. In a narrative system such as this, you kind of have to. They can. I like it when they create parts of the world. But yes, the boost dice is good. Some very easy ways to get that with not too much money, such as having better medical kits or putting scopes on your weapons to get the aiming condition. Try to get them. On the downsides, difficulty dice, purple. They have failures, but it's probably that way. Arrow down. That is essentially each failure cancels out a success. If you have no successes left, you don't succeed. It's that simple. Doesn't matter how many failures you can get, you still just fail. It's not like a case of if you get 5 failures, it's 5 times as bad. We sometimes play that up just for humour's sake, which is always good when everyone's all sporting, but technically that's not a rule. Although these are a threat. They are essentially the opposite of advantage, and they cancel it out. Threats allow me to do things such as give the NPC, well, it allows the opposition to get advantages or to cause you problems. Threat, if you get a lot of threat, can cause longer term complications. Say, for example, you're negotiating with gangsters. If you get enough threat in the negotiations, it might be a case of when they turn up at the meeting point, there's more of them there, which is actually brings up an interesting point. You can succeed and have a lot of threat. There are 2 separate metrics. So, say for example, you are negotiating with gangsters to get a spice deal, a container of spice so you can pay off a hut. You can succeed with threat. They turn up with a spice, they jack up the price knowing you're desperate. Plus, for every extra threat, throw in an extra minion group or minion, depending on how powerful your characters are. I'll get to it in a bit, but as a DM or GM, you don't add too many of these. It's a bit of an odd system as a GM to get a handle on when it comes to difficulty level wise, but I'll cover that in a minute. Then we have challenge dice. Players shouldn't see too many of these unless it's an opposed check with an NPC, which is something I'm slowly realising as I GM longer and longer. You should normally only see 1 or 2 of these as... thank you. Someone said I'm looking good, so it's good to hear. Her character will not die next game. So these are essentially the equivalent of the proficiency dice, including the fact that they have a despair option, which does not cancel out a triumph. However, these also, I should also include, I've got that a triumph gives you a success as well as being a triumph, but they are separate metrics in the same way that a despair gives you a failure and a despair. So that the triumphs, so the success and the failure and the despair and triumph can cancel each other out, but you'll still get a triumph and a despair, which can lead to some very interesting situations, such as more enemy might show up, reinforcements, but at the same time, well, hang on, let me pick something that I will do as a GM a bit more often. A despair can make the player character, if they're the one shooting the weapon, run out of ammo. Have weapons malfunction. So if they roll a triumph from despair, your gun jams. You're being overwhelmed by enemy and suddenly your gun's not working. Of course, my guys all carry around 27,000 guns, or as many as their encumbrance allows, but whatever. But the triumph might hit a steam pipe, and suddenly anyone at longer range, all those enemies rushing forward with their blasters, just cannot see. Both despair and triumph in the same moment. I do like the system for that. Sometimes it can take a little bit of a time to sort of work out exactly how it all fits together, and there are some very generic options you can pick. If there isn't something in the moment that can give a really good narrative advantage. Light and dark side. The light side dice, the light side dots on the dice, the hollow ones, they are what light side force wielders, which is what player character force wielders are, or at least should be, want. They roll that, they get more power, or they can use their powers better, basically. It's basically rolling for mana. Dark side points is what the dark side force users, surprisingly enough, use. However, there is an option to draw upon the other side of the force. It's a difficult thing for your character to do. I haven't covered Destiny, but basically you spend a Destiny, take a strain, and you can do it. If you're a light side Jedi drawing on the dark side, you also slowly approach the dark side. But that's outside the scope of probably what we'll be talking about today. So that's the basis of the dice. Generally, you're looking at a roll where you've got like 2 or 3 of these, maybe one of these if you're just a fairly average character, a couple more of these if you're a better character, and say 3 or 4 of these, maybe one of these, maybe a couple of these. Your dice pools at the start look very complicated. So you quite quickly learn how to select them, how to roll them, and then it's a simple case of matching up the symbols and eliminating until you end up with what's unique left. You get pretty good at it pretty quick. So what you have on the dice comes from a character sheet, surprisingly enough. This is my Post Trooper. And I still can't turn the green screen back on because there's more green stuff on here to match the colour of the dice. My Purge Trooper has 310 XP on its character sheet, and the players are now at 400 something, and that is why they keep just dying. So, attributes, I won't go through them individually. I think that's pretty easy to do once you just look at it. It's pretty intuitive. Brawn is brawn. There's only a couple of ones that you might sort of go, how is that linked up to that? But Bill explains it in the book. But basically, if you are untrained, you just roll your ability dice for whatever the skill is. So say you don't have any skill in light weapons, and you have 4 agility, you roll 4 of these. That simple. Plus whatever the difficulty is. If you are well trained, say for example, these guys have 2 yellow dice, 2 green dice in their heavy weapons skill. You roll them. That's a fair amount of dice. You're pretty at that point guaranteed to hit. It's just about how hard you hit, whether you crit at that point. And yeah, it's really that simple. There's a lot of nice auto calculation sheets on the internet. There's a program made by a guy called Ogdude that is getting better. It's pretty good actually at this point. He's been working on it, and that can do all sheet management that you need. In fact, I'll just quickly say that the fan support for this system, like I said before, is like nothing else. Which is good because we thought the game was going to be cancelled, but it's kind of been sent off to another company to do, so they'll keep on printing and making new stuff. How the quality will be, it's a different story, but at least they'll be printing off the books. I want them all. I need a better job. Alright, so that's the very basics of the dice. So when you hear me say something like, roll an attack, difficulty 3, it just means they have 3 of these. Technically, difficulty 3 is like intermediate difficulty, but we quickly learned that it's just easier to give the numbers of the dice. So, difficulty 3, challenge 1. 3 purples, 1 red. Sorted. Something that took me a while to learn as a GM, and so I'll say here, is boost dice, as these are, and the setback dice, as these are your friends. Players should be aiming to get as many of these on their dice rolls as possible, and you should give a fair amount of these. There are a lot of skills, equipment, and talents, which I'll cover in a moment, that remove these dice. I kept on upgrading difficulty too much. Instead, you just add boost dice. It's dark in here. You're being shot at while trying to slice through a door panel. These things all give penalties. And then the character can go, but I'm basically Han Solo and I can just shoot with my gun and I get to remove 3 of these dice because I'm in, this and that. It's like, good on you. You kind of got to give the players the ability to use their talents like that because there's a lot of quite expensive talents that exist to purely remove setback dice. So you've got to let it use it. And also it tells me that is how the game is designed. Something I didn't realise for way too long. Also, it explains why when you're going through the game for the first time and getting a sense of all the difficulties, it's like everything. Like some of the higher level difficulties are like 3 or 4 difficulty dice. You're looking, you're going, but my players can walk that in. It's like, you have 4 difficulty dice, but you should be also having 3 setback dice. And I'll upgrade one of the difficulty dice using Destiny. Which leads me to Destiny. We use rocks that we jokingly refer to as bits of Alderaan. The actual Destiny tokens, excuse the noise, I have some of, because I bought way too many dice, because that's what I do, are these. Light, dark. The start of the game, every player rolls the force dice, and whatever they roll, be it 1 or 2 light side or 1 or 2 dark side, that's how many Destiny points are in each category. The players can spend light side Destiny points, which then comes over to me. I can spend dark side Destiny points, which then go over to the players. Now, Destiny is quite a useful thing. It should be used quite frequently. The force should basically flow around the players, and their destinies quite a lot. When we first started playing, we used it as a quite sparing resource, but it is one of those things of, as the DM or GM, I need to let these guys have destiny so that they can use some of their more powerful abilities, or to like upgrade their attacks, basically, or like upgrade piloting when it's necessary, or like in the key skills they can upgrade. So the other thing that players can do is they can introduce elements into the story by spending destiny. They're not meant to be game breaking, and it does make a point that it's to negotiate with the GM. But we've had examples where they've been on a spaceship they've recently stolen, because that tends to be how they get them all, and because they are criminals. And spaceships are never properly locked in Star Wars. And then they have to go outside the ship, and it's like, oh, we'll use a destiny to make sure there's all EVA seats and rebreathers and the like there. Done. Also saves a lot of logistical backwards and forwards when they can just go, here's a destiny point. Do we have the basic equipment we need? Yes. The game mechanics themselves talk a lot about upgrade, increasing, and adding dice, and removing, subtracting, and downgrading dice. It's a different order. Basically, what it means is this is just sort of basically standard unit of dice. If you were to upgrade it, it becomes one of these. So if you spend, say, for example, a destiny point, you can upgrade, I would upgrade, say, their difficulty in their attack. It might not seem like a huge difference, because while this is weighted worse than this, not that much, but until you get challenge dice in, they don't have a chance of rolling a despair. And vice versa with them getting triumphs. So upgrading, especially from something that has no real penalty for failure beyond failing itself, is important. So that's upgrading. Basically, you upgrade every difficulty dice until you've upgraded them all, and then you put one of these at the end and upgrade it, like along those lines. When you increase the number of dice, you just add more of these at the end. Increases the difficulty without increasing the risk of a despair. When you add a dice, these are what you're adding, subtracting, or subtracting the boosts on the end. Takes a little bit of time to get used to the language, but it's not that difficult. Excuse me, I'm talking a lot. So, that leads us, but what about characters? Well, they have a lot of different races and the like in all the books. The majority of the Star Wars races are included at various points. They do the annoying thing that I find more and more role-playing games are doing, where instead of being like, here's a book that's races of the galaxy or species of the galaxy. It's by the Corellian source book, and you pick up 3 more character classes. You know, there's a bit more equipment, a couple more species. It's just like, okay, if we really want everything, we have to split across everything. But online, there's a lot of there's pretty much every race that isn't written in one of the books. People have come up with fairly balanced stats for them. All the races are pretty well balanced. There's also a lot of like creation guides and stuff that have combined with information. No like lore or anything like that, just raw stats. So if you're like, oh, I want to play, nearly said Triani because we have one, but that wasn't actually something anyone had made. I had to convert a Cathar. Yeah, if you want to play Twi'lek, it's easy enough to get a creation guide and just look down and listen to you see Twi'lek. So races themselves are all actually quite average. You'll spend a lot of your starting XP on upgrading ability points, because to upgrade ability points in-game is quite difficult. I'll get to that in a moment. Then you pick your obligation. It's probably a bit beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about. Basically, it's in many ways it's basically a more active version of a background. You know, are you Han Solo that owes Jabba the Hutt money? In Age of Rebellion, it's are you Wedge Antilles, who is a fighter pilot for the Rebellion, or and the like. You know, what is your duty in the soldiers? They have careers rather than classes. So, bounty hunter, example. Where's the convenient list? Should be right here. Nope. So, bounty hunter, colonist, explorer, hired gun, smuggler, technician, and that's it. They're all kind of how they sound. You then have within the career specialities. So like you have pilot. You have these trees. As you can see, a lot of the ability trees are, you know, basically allow you to cancel out setback dice. The bottom of each tree, which is exponentially, well, not exponentially, but linearly more expensive to progress down, is, am I pointing at the right one? Yes. There's dedication at the bottom of every skill tree, which allows you to increase one skill up to rank of 6, which is above what you can start with. They're quite expensive to get to. But still, there is a way to progress your base abilities as you increase in potency as a character. You can also branch out to more and more skill trees, speciality trees. It's more expensive if you go into a different career, but it's still possible. You can switch between careers. Yeah, you just have to pay that extra amount of money, or extra amount of experience points. But generally, though, I was quite worried because you get a fair amount of XP after each game, and I was quite worried that the player characters were becoming too powerful. But what I found is that the characters who have specialised in combat have reached the point of diminishing returns on combat skills. You can only buy, for example, your weapon skills up to 5 ranks, and equipment only gets you so far. I mean, equipment can be very powerful, but there are limits on how powerful the equipment is. So then at that point, if you just min-maxed your way up to a combat monster, not only do you have so many holes in all your other skills, you can't actually progress from there. At a point, it doesn't matter how much XP you have. You just have to get other things. So that's the XP system there is quite handy. I think, like I said, I hadn't fully planned this. I just decided to do it on the spot. What's the appendix? Not the appendix, the index. Nope, not there. This is obviously thrilling viewing. You can play sentient droids, which is always fun. There we go. Talents is just basically what they call unique abilities you get in the skill trees. So there's one, for example, called Barrage, which if you're using a heavy weapon at long range, you do extra damage. Weapons are as they are. Weapons are very customizable. Most of the characters haven't really upgraded their weapons, as in bought bigger weapons. They've mainly sort of personalised their weapons. Each weapon or armour has hard points, and you modify them. And I sort of like it, Rooker's got his own personalised bowcaster. I'll just do an office stare into the background because it's powerful and can one-shot my purge troopers. Autofire is relatively broken in this game. Just be very careful before making autofire any easier in the slightest. Basically in combat, you shoot. It's not too hard to hit. For example, if someone's at short range, it's difficulty 1, which if you're rolling probably 4 dice, which will be a combination of these, you're going to hit. You add successes to the base weapon's base damage. Each weapon has a critical rating. If you get that many advantages, you can activate the critical. You get to choose when to activate it. You can spend the advantages on other things. And then by that damage, everyone has a soak pool. If that is removed from the damage, they take it as a wound. Player characters also have strain. If you have too much strain, it's a bit vague on if you get knocked out. You don't necessarily get knocked out, you're just out of the fight. So you are either knocked out, you surrender, you curl up in a fetal position, panicking, something along those lines. Or you just gibbering tased on the ground, So armor is good, but it doesn't soak particularly high. I think Rooper, even with some cybernetics and being a Wookiee, this soak includes your brawn skill. He's like soak 8, my most difficult person to take down in a fight. But it's not too difficult to do. A Stormtrooper blaster is damage rating 9. And then if I hit, which means I've got at least 1 success, so you do a minimum of 10 damage. So it adds up pretty quick. Although speaking of damage, the game, it's actually very difficult to kill player characters. The game is meant to be a game of heroic actions and the like. It is not a game of everyone dies all the time. Basically, if you get downed, you just take critical wounds. You might have to spend months in the back to tank if you take too much damage, but it's the only way to die is to get a ridiculously high critical wound. Of course, every time you get a critical wound, you take a penalty to how bad the critical wound is, but it is possible to be shot with a rocket launcher, take double your health, and live. But this is Star Wars. There are examples of such things in the movies, and not just for Force wielders either. It's also Star Wars, where that just means you'll come back with a cool cybernetic limb. So there's a lot of spaceships, of course, which are always fun. I would like there to be a bit of a better guide on a lot of smuggling and the like. There is a book dedicated to it, which I must admit I haven't had too much time to read, so there might be a section I haven't seen. But I find Rebels is a good example of that. Not the Rebels book for this, which I have. but the TV show, because they actually, especially Hondo talks about how he actually smuggles. It's not just a case of I'm a smuggler now, I'm on a planet. But starships use what they refer to as starship scale. And basically, everything is 10 times deadlier or more resistant than personal scale. So if you get hit by a walker, you're dead. Well, you're downed basically. Don't get shot by anything for vehicles or starship scale. Which is, even some of the land speeders have spaceship scale weapons. And I've been very careful about which ones of them I've included. Because you don't want like some basic cops that pull up with a basic land speeder and go, oh, we've got a weapon in one shot. PCs. Not super cool. Space combat is and just encounters are quite a different beast. An area we haven't explored too much on the stream. It's basically a second set of rules. They are quite related to the first set, but I'm not going to go into them here. Books are good. They have a lot about places and the like here. There's a nice galactic map. Bunch of notable locations. It's not a lot of detail, which I both like and dislike. I can never decide. On one hand, you can't particularly pick up a book, at least the core books, and go, tell me about Sheik. You get like a couple of paragraphs, but Corellia has its own source book. The Hut Empire or Hut Space has its own core book, own rule book. But I find there's like the Wikipedia and things like that. Just once you something exists, you look it up, and there's a million different references to everything. Although I just also like to make things up as I go. Invent my own Star Wars planets or modify a couple of them, jam them together. Sort of cover most things. Adversaries. Enemies come in 3 different categories. They come in the minion category, they come in the rival category, and they come in the nemesis category. Minions form groups. Individually, they're quite useless. In groups, their skills they don't combine. So, for example, stormtroopers, despite all the jokes, can actually shoot people, but they don't get any proficiency dice to shoot by themselves. So for every extra stormtrooper you add to the group, you upgrade one of their ability dice to a proficiency dice. So a group of 4 stormtroopers is shooting with 3 proficiency dice. That's 3 chances for crits, or triumphs, which can become critical wounds. You put a few minion groups around, and the players start to know it. Minion groups have 5 hit points per each character in the minion group, and as they get damaged, they reduce how combat effective they are, or how effective they are at skills. Basically, they become a smaller minion group. That is, so basically, it's every 5 hit points or every crit, they lose a member. So it's pretty easy to take them down, and if you hit them with a couple of big shots. And it's probably one of the few enemies I'd actually recommend outright critting. Because, for example, rivals, you can do critical wounds to, but unless you're pretty much guaranteed to do an insta-kill critical wounds, you might as well just take extra damage some way, or set yourself up to do some more damage later. Rivals have full health tracks. They don't have strain tracks. Any strain damage they take becomes a wound. Whether or not you decide if they go down dead or injured is on if they take a strain or wound damage as their last damage. That's what happens. Although, when any character, PC or otherwise, is downed, they take an automatic critical hit. So it is possible to shoot someone down stunned and kill them. Unlikely, possible. Which represents, you stun them and they fall down and they crack their head on the table. I kind of like that. Anytime you pull out guns, even with the stun on, there's a potential problem there. Nemesis. Beside Nemesis being the name of a really cool Greek goddess, and I wish you could use it as a person's name in real life, they are essentially the equivalent of a character. Like most adversaries, they have their cut back skill blocks with some things a bit mixed around, just so they're a bit easier to run than like having a proper skill set. But they have their own wound track, they have their own strain track, they have a number of abilities. They're often quite deadly. Yes, that's adversaries. That's really like most of the stuff I'm intending to cover today. So basically, good, want more of them. Bad, want to give them to the enemy. Everything cancels the opposite it out except Triumph and Despair, which just makes it more fun. And really, the system is a narrative one. That's probably the thing I want to really focus on. I've gotten the PCs or the players to come up with names of locations and the like, but there are abilities, like if you're a smuggler, you can just go, oh, I know black market dealer on this planet. And I'm always a fan of games like that. After all, we're all here for fun, and I want the players to surprise me. I make no bones about the fact that I'm not a huge preparer as a DM. I probably should be a touch more than I am. But I like to think I have regional improv skills as a result of that, especially our Monday night group and the chaos they throw at me. I like my imagination being fired by the assistance of people setting the framing conditions of a scene. It's good fun. I trust my players, and I like to think they trust me, and I know they often give me enough rope to do what I want with them, and try to make it as fun for everyone as possible. We don't win. No, as it is just the GM. You come in and you go, oh well, all these cool characters I've invented, they're all going to die. It's just a matter of how quick. I'll get redeemed occasionally. They do. Just try to come up with new things and make it interesting. But I find the easiest way to make things interesting is to listen to the players. I wouldn't have thought to put a T7 droid in from the Old Republic. One of the players specifically looked around for one, and they're like, you know what? Let's say he probably has one. Made it quite difficult for them to get it, but they did. And the droid has a special ability which allows it to remove setback dice when researching ancient technology, because why not? The player's going to put an effort into world building, I'm going to reward it. It goes back to the obligation, which I kind of skipped over, and backstories and things like that. Players get tied in. Which is fun. We're going to get to Lucky's backstory soon, but I won't spoil the surprise. Yes, the system is very much designed as a narrative system. Even in combat, it's probably as a system, there's more you can do in combat to mess with, if you will, people on the other side, or boost your own team than any other system I've played. And by that I just mean things in the dice themselves, not like actual skills. Because like we have a bodyguard, Rebecca's has got skills from the bodyguard tree, so you can really improve the defense of other people in combat. But that's like a specific skill. I just mean by rolling advantage and then choosing to give advantage to the next player. The system encourages that. The cheapest thing, if you will, to spend advantage on is to give a boost dice to the next player, or next player on your side. And I like things like that, just nicely encouraged. Bit of cooperation. It actually leads me to the initiative order. That was one thing I didn't... I find it quite interesting. There's two stats you can use to roll for initiative. You almost always use vigilance, I found. The only time where you'd use cool is basically where you know combat's going to happen, to the point where you've set up an ambush. Like, you have a chance to think about it. That's it. So in the example, like in the book, they give you setting up an ambush, but there's a few more situations where I'd let people decide which one they use, but it's almost always vigilance. Yeah, and the initiative order is basically ranked by successes, with advantages and triumphs breaking advantages and triumphs breaking ties, and players then winning if there's a tie at the end of all that. Of course, if there's two players of the same initiative, it doesn't actually matter, because the initiative order, once written down, is PCs versus and then NPCs. So players can choose which order to go in. This means that if you've been downed and someone's got a stim pack, in almost every case, you'll get healed back up to consciousness before you miss a turn having to make death saves and the like. It does allow people to really kind of tactically go, I'll go now. We've got the most boosts, I'm the best shot, the big bad guy's running away, let me take it. Or if I go now, then I can slice the door that'll trap 3 of the enemy outside of combat before they get their turn. It's, once again, really good to allow cooperation between players. Everyone, of course, wants the medic to go just before them. That's just human nature. I think I might leave it there. I've sort of briefly covered what I want. It's a really fun system. You need to basically play the dice to get used to the dice. Before we went live with the campaign, we did 3 essentially off Twitch recordings, just as our session 0 game, if you will, or session 0.1 game, to get used to it. I also, before we did, just did some combats against myself just to get a handle on the dice. But really, what I didn't learn, and Terry knew that, was you need more of these. But Star Wars, it's always fun. It's set up to be big and ridiculous. It's a space opera. Edge of the Empire, though, has that real Mandalorian feel to it. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if The Mandalorian was inspired by the role-playing game. There's too many coincidences. Like, the party in The Mandalorian, if you will, could easily be a role-playing party. I mean, that's true for many TV shows I've seen lately. I've gone, is this writing room just people writing their role-playing games, just, putting a bit more work into it? Yeah, the Empire is always a great villain. The Inquisitors that they've added in more recent canon make good enemy force users, because honestly, you don't want to have to pay to defeat Darth Vader, I don't think. If I was to make any kind of Star Wars content, might be a future warning for the stream itself, but I'm actually referencing a game without trying to spoil it. I would not allow Darth Vader to turn up just to be defeated. He would be a creature of horror. The Emperor does have stats as well, and similarly as does Darth Vader, and yeah, you're dead. You're done. Same with some of the bigger Star Destroyers. It's just, they have rules for big ship combats and the like, but it's pretty irrelevant, basically. The ship combat rules, they do have it set up that the size of the ships is the deciding factor in how difficult it is to hit a target. And that basically means if you're running away from a Star Destroyer, one hit you're going to be in big trouble, but it's not too hard to keep them from hitting you, especially if you have good deflector shields. On that though, I think I might leave it. Thank you for watching this. Ask any questions below if you want, and I'll try to answer them. The community is very active on the internet just in general. Every time I've ever wondered out something, I just found it. Last thing, one of my players posted in our Discord chat for this channel was someone who'd made a fan-made cooking guide. So I might have to check that out, but just I love the little things like that that add that like names of food and drinks and the like that really add to the feel of living in a location. I think that's what really always draws me back to Star Wars. It has that very similar but other feel. But now I'm starting to ramble. So I will see you guys next Thursday for an actual game. If you are watching this on YouTube, I intend to put it at the start of our playlist for Star Wars. The first episode you'll see, we're a lot better by the 20th episode, I'll put it that way. Bear with us as we struggle to learn the system. We like to think that we have now, but we are learning new things every day. It is a more complicated system than, say, 5th Ed Dungeons and Dragons, which is the other one we use. But I don't think it's overly complicated. Over time, especially as a GM, you kind of intuitively learn, oh, that's probably about this. You know, let's pretend that I used some complicated math and didn't just guess. So on that trade secret, I think I'll leave it. See everyone. See you on our normal games Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, D&D, and Star Wars.